The night everything changed, my daughter was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a mug of chamomile tea with both hands, smiling the way she always does. Warm, careful, practiced. "Mom, you need to slow down," she said. "Let me take care of you for once." I believed her. For almost 8 months, I believed her completely. My name is Lorraine. I'm 67 years old, and until recently I thought the hardest thing I would ever survive was burying my husband. I was wrong. Frank and I had been together for 41 years. We met in Cincinnati when we were both in our mid-20s. He was an electrician, I was a school librarian, and we built a life that was quiet and steady and full in all the ways that matter. We raised 2 children in the same house we bought in 1989. We grew tomatoes in the backyard every summer. We argued about money sometimes, laughed more than we fought, and took one big vacation every few years, always somewhere with water because Frank loved the ocean. He died on a Tuesday in November 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to the end. I watched him disappear faster than I had any way to prepare for, and when it was over, I sat in our kitchen for a long time, just listening to how quiet the house had become. My daughter moved back to Cincinnati about 6 weeks after the funeral. She said she wanted to be closer to me. She said she'd been thinking about it anyway. The lease on her apartment in Columbus was almost up, and her husband could work remotely. It made sense, she told me. Family made sense. My son-in-law, her husband, was polite in that careful way that people are when they're trying hard not to show what they actually think of you. He worked in tech, something with project management, and spent most of his time on his laptop with headphones in. He never said much to me directly. He didn't have to. My daughter did all the talking for both of them. At first, it felt like exactly what I needed. There was noise in the house again. Someone to eat dinner with. My daughter would bring me coffee in the morning, and we'd sit at the kitchen table the way we used to when she was in high school, before everything got complicated the way it always does when children grow up and start making choices you don't fully understand. I should have paid more attention to the moment the tea started. It was a Tuesday evening, maybe 2 months after they moved in. My daughter came into the living room where I was reading and set a mug down on the side table next to me. "I picked up some herbal blends at the market," she said. "This one's supposed to help with sleep. Good for inflammation, too." She smiled. "You've seemed tired lately." I hadn't told her I was tired, but I thanked her and drank it, and I slept deeply that night, more deeply than I usually did. She brought me tea every evening after that. Sometimes chamomile, sometimes something with lavender, sometimes a blend, she said. She ordered online specifically for women over 60. She always presented it the same way, gently, caringly, with that warm smile. I had no reason to question any of it. But slowly, over the following months, I started noticing things about myself that didn't add up. I began losing track of small conversations. Once I walked into the garage and stood there for a full minute, unable to remember why I'd come. I called my friend Wanda one afternoon and forgot halfway through a sentence what I'd been about to say. My daughter noticed all of it. She was very good at noticing. "Mom, you told me that story yesterday," she'd say gently, not unkindly, just observing. "Did I?" She'd nod slowly with that expression on her face. The one that looked like concern, but later I would understand was something else entirely. Her husband started making comments too. Nothing sharp. Just small, quiet observations dropped into conversations like stones into still water. "You seemed confused about the date earlier. You left the faucet running this morning." Each time my daughter would glance at him, and he'd glance back, and neither of them would say anything more about it. As I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. That's the worst part of what they were doing. It wasn't the tea. It was the way the tea made me feel foggy enough that their version of me began to seem real. The night I stopped believing them started the same as every other Tuesday. My daughter came in with the mug, set it down, kissed me on the cheek. I thanked her. She went back to the kitchen, and I sat there holding the warm ceramic with both hands, staring at the steam rising off the surface, and something shifted in my chest. Not a thought exactly. More like a feeling. A wrongness I couldn't name. I didn't drink it that night. I waited until I heard her settle back into the kitchen, then I quietly poured the tea into the small succulent pot on the windowsill. Then I turned off my lamp and lay in bed pretending to sleep. About an hour later, I heard their voices in the hallway. My daughter first. She seemed really out of it this afternoon. Her husband, good. That's what we need. A pause. Her, the financial advisor said if we get the power of attorney finalized before the end of the quarter, the account transfers would be cleaner. Him, how much longer? Her, quieter, a few more weeks. She needs to look worse before she looks better. I lay completely still in the dark with my heart slamming in my chest so hard I was almost sure they could hear it. She needs to look worse. I stayed awake until 3 in the morning, listening to the house settle around me, trying to understand what I had just heard. Power of attorney, account transfers, financial advisor. My daughter had been asking questions about my finances for months. I had thought she was just being practical the way she always was. She'd helped me organize my files after Frank died. She knew where everything was. She knew about the retirement account, the savings, the life insurance payout, the equity in this house. She knew everything, and she had been building something out of all that knowledge while I sat at the kitchen table drinking tea and going slowly numb. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I lay in bed listening to the birds outside and forcing myself to think clearly, step by step, the way I used to when I had a classroom full of children who needed something organized out of chaos. First, I needed to understand what had actually been in that tea. Second, I needed someone I could trust. Third, I could not let my daughter know that anything had changed. I waited until my daughter left to run errands and her husband put his headphones in. Then I took 3 of the loose-leaf tea bags from the canister on the counter and put them in my purse. I drove myself to the urgent care clinic on Vine Street, where I'd been going for small things for years. The doctor there, a woman named Dr. Okafor who had once treated Frank's shoulder, agreed to see me without an appointment. I told her everything. The tea, the fogginess, the conversations I'd been overhearing, the way my memory had seemed to deteriorate over the past several months in a way that felt sudden and foreign, not like forgetting the way aging sometimes brings forgetting, but like thinking through water. Dr. Okafor listened without interrupting. Then she took the tea bags and said she would send them to a lab. She looked at me directly and said, "Lorraine, what you're describing, the cognitive fog, the sudden onset, the sleep changes, those are consistent with certain herbal compounds that can be misused." Misused, I repeated. Some herbal supplements have sedative properties that are completely safe in normal doses, she said carefully. In elevated doses or over long periods, they can cause significant cognitive impairment, especially in older adults. I held that sentence in my mind on the drive home. Significant cognitive impairment. My daughter had been giving me something every single night for 8 months and watching what happened to me afterward. I was not losing my mind. Someone had been renting out space in it without my permission. When I walked back through my front door that afternoon, my daughter was already home, standing at the kitchen counter chopping vegetables for dinner. She smiled when she heard me come in. "There you are. I was wondering where you went." "Just some errands," I said. "You should have told me. I would have come with you." She set down the knife and looked at me. "You okay? You seem a little pale." "I'm fine," I said, "just tired." Her eyes moved over my face for a moment, measuring something, and then she nodded and went back to the cutting board. "I'll have your tea ready after dinner," she said. "That sounds nice," I said. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my hands flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking. The person I had to call was my older sister's son, my nephew, Andre. He lived in Dayton, about an hour away, and worked as a paralegal for an estate attorney. He was 38, sharp, and had always been the kind of person who read the fine print on everything. When his own grandmother had tried to sign over her house to a neighbor who'd become her helper, Andre had been the one who caught it. I called him from the bathroom with the water running. He picked up on the second ring. "Aunt Lorraine? Hey, what's going on? I need you to come see me," I said quietly. "Don't call ahead, don't tell anyone, just come on Saturday when you know your cousin will be out." A pause, then, "Are you safe?" "Yes, but I need help." He came Saturday morning. My daughter and her husband had gone to a home show downtown. Something they'd planned weeks before. Andre arrived at 9, and we sat at the kitchen table with the door locked, and I told him everything from the beginning. He didn't say anything until I finished. Then he pulled out a small notepad, which made me almost laugh despite everything. Some people show love with food. Andre showed it by taking notes. "Okay," he said. "First, the lab results from Dr. Okafor. Have you heard back?" "Not yet. She said maybe 10 days. When you do, get a copy of everything in writing." He wrote something down. "Second, do you have any evidence of these conversations you overheard?" "No, not yet." He looked up. "You need recordings, Aunt Lorraine. In Ohio, it's legal to record a conversation you're part of, but you have to actually be present in the space. If you're in your own home and they're talking in the hallway, that likely qualifies." I nodded slowly. "Okay." Third, he set down the pen. "Has anyone approached you about signing anything? Power of attorney? Account changes? Anything?" "Not directly, but she organizes my mail. I let her start doing that after Frank died. I didn't see the point in." I stopped. Andre's expression didn't change, but something tightened in his eyes. "When did that start?" "About 4 months ago. I need you to check your accounts. Today, while they're out. Online if you can." I pulled up my bank account on my phone. For a moment, I just looked at the numbers on the screen without really seeing them. Then something caught my eye. A series of small withdrawals over the past 3 months. Never more than $300 at a time, spread out unevenly, the way you'd spread things out if you were trying not to make them look like a pattern. My hands were very still as I turned the phone toward Andre. He looked at the screen for a long time. Then he set the phone down gently, the way you set something down when you're trying not to show how serious things have gotten. "Okay," he said quietly, "here's what we're going to do." For the next 3 weeks, I gave the performance of my life. Every evening after dinner, my daughter would bring me my tea. I would wrap my hands around the mug, inhale the steam, take small sips, and set it on the table when she wasn't looking. I kept a small bottle of water nearby, and when the moment was right, I'd pour the tea into it and cap it tight. Then I'd pretend the heaviness was setting in. Slower reactions, vague answers, the occasional repeated question. I hated every second of it. Not because it was difficult, because it was necessary. Meanwhile, Andre was working with his employer, an estate attorney named Mr. Calloway, to understand the full scope of what my daughter and her husband had been building. We discovered they had contacted a financial planning firm in Columbus about restructuring my retirement assets. We found a draft durable power of attorney document in my daughter's email. Andre noticed it when she'd accidentally CC'd my old email address, one she'd forgotten I still checked. The document had my name on it. The signature line was blank, but it wouldn't have stayed blank much longer. Dr. Okafor called me on a Thursday afternoon while my daughter was in the shower. The lab had found elevated levels of valerian root and passion flower in the tea blend, both legal herbal compounds, but in concentrations that were 3 to 4 times the standard recommended dosage. In older adults, that level of sustained exposure could cause memory disruption, fatigue, and cognitive slowing that closely resembled early dementia symptoms. I wrote down everything she said word for word and put the paper in an envelope in my car, under the seat. What I recorded over those 3 weeks would have been enough on its own. But the night that gave us everything was a Thursday, 12 days before the appointment my daughter had scheduled for me with a geriatric specialist she'd found. A doctor I hadn't asked to see and hadn't been consulted about. I was sitting in my bedroom with the door slightly open. Andre had shown me how to use the voice memo app on my phone with the screen off. I had been carrying it in my cardigan pocket for days. My daughter and her husband were in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. The appointment is in 2 weeks. If Dr. Henson documents any cognitive decline, that goes straight to the attorney. Him. And the power of attorney? Once we have the medical confirmation, the attorney says we can move forward. She's not going to contest it. She barely knows what day it is anymore. A silence. Then he said, "What about the house?" Slowly, "We'll list it by spring." The market in Westwood is strong right now. I've already talked to an agent. Him. And your brother? Her. I'll handle my brother. He's not involved. Him. He will be if she tells him. Her quiet but certain. She's not going to tell him anything. She doesn't even remember our conversations anymore. I sat in the dark with my phone in my lap and my husband's old quilt across my knees, and I made myself breathe slowly, evenly, the way you breathe when you are not going to fall apart, when falling apart is simply not something you can afford. She had said, she doesn't even remember our conversations anymore. She believed that. She genuinely believed it. I pressed stop on the voice memo and held the phone against my chest for a long moment. Outside the window, the neighbor's porch light flickered on. A car moved slowly down the street. The ordinary world continued at its ordinary pace, completely unaware that inside this house, my daughter had just handed me the one thing I needed more than anything else. Her own voice, saying exactly what she had planned to do with my life. I called Andre the next morning from the parking lot of the grocery store. I played him the recording through the phone. He didn't speak for almost a minute after it ended. Then he said, "Aunt Lorraine, I need you to come to Mr. Calloway's office this week." I met with Mr. Calloway on a Friday. His office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown with large windows and the kind of quiet that meant serious work happened there. He was a man in his late 60s with white hair and reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose. He reviewed the recording, the lab results from Dr. Okafor, the bank withdrawal records, and the draft power of attorney document Andre had printed out. When he finished, he folded his hands and looked at me directly. "What your daughter has been doing constitutes financial exploitation of an elder," he said. "The unauthorized withdrawals, the attempted power of attorney without informed consent, the deliberate creation of symptoms to support a false medical narrative. These are serious." "What can we do?" I asked. "We can move to protect your assets immediately," he said. "We place a temporary freeze on any account changes without your direct authorization. We notify your bank's fraud department." He picked up the recording device. "And we preserve every piece of evidence you've gathered." "There's also an appointment she made for me," I said, "with a geriatric specialist." Mr. Calloway nodded slowly. "Go to the appointment," he said. I looked at him. "Go," he said again, "and be yourself. Be exactly, completely yourself." The appointment was on a Wednesday morning. My daughter drove me, chatting the whole way about the weather and a new restaurant downtown. She walked me into the waiting room and smiled at the receptionist and sat beside me reading a magazine while we waited. The doctor, Dr. Henson, had a small, tidy office and a manner that was brisk but not unkind. She asked me a series of questions while my daughter sat in the corner with a notepad. I answered every question clearly, directly, fully. I remembered dates, I remembered sequences. I named the current vice president, the last 3 books I'd read, the exact date Frank had been diagnosed. At one point, my daughter shifted in her chair. Dr. Henson glanced at her briefly, then looked back at me. "Mrs. Lorraine, your daughter mentioned some concerns about your memory." "I'm sure she did," I said. A pause. "Can you tell me in your own words how you've been feeling?" I looked at my daughter for just a moment before answering. Then I looked back at the doctor. "I've been clearer recently," I said. "Much clearer." Dr. Henson wrote something down. She asked a few more questions. Then she removed her glasses and looked at my daughter. "I don't see evidence of significant cognitive decline," she said. "Some of what you've described could be attributed to grief, disrupted sleep, or," she glanced at her notes, "certain supplements taken in high doses over an extended period." My daughter's pen stopped moving against her notepad. "I'd recommend," Dr. Henson continued, "that Miss Lorraine discontinue any herbal supplements and schedule a follow-up in 3 months. But I cannot document a diagnosis that the evidence doesn't support." The drive home was very quiet. My daughter stared at the road and said almost nothing. Once, at a red light, she said she just didn't see you on a bad day. No, I agreed, she didn't. That evening, Mr. Calloway sent 2 certified letters, one to my daughter and one to her husband, informing them that I was represented by legal counsel and that any unauthorized activity related to my financial accounts or healthcare decisions would be addressed accordingly. He also sent a letter to my bank. I was in the kitchen when my daughter opened hers. She stood at the counter for a long time holding the paper. Then she turned and looked at me, and there was no warm smile this time. Just something stripped back and unreadable. "You hired a lawyer," she said. "Yes. When? A few weeks ago." She set the letter down very carefully. "Mom, the tea," I said. She went very still. "The doctor sent it to a lab," I said. "The levels were 3 to 4 times what they should have been. I have the report." She opened her mouth and closed it again. "I also have the recording from Thursday night," I said, "about Dr. Henson. And the house. And the spring listing." The color had drained from her face. Her husband appeared in the doorway behind her, and I watched him read the situation in about 3 seconds and decide to say nothing. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said finally. Her voice had gone very small. I had thought about this moment for weeks. I had imagined what I would say and how I would say it. But standing in my own kitchen, in the house Frank and I had paid off together, in the place where I had raised her, I found I didn't have the speech I had prepared. What I had instead was this. "I know you didn't think about hurting me," I said. "I think you thought about the money and the house and what you needed, and then you found a way to tell yourself it would be okay. That's not the same thing as not wanting to hurt me." She started to cry. Quietly, with her hand over her mouth the way she'd cried when she was small. I let her. Then I said, "I need you and your husband to move out by the end of the month." She looked up. "Mom, I'm not asking," I said. "I'm telling you." Her husband cleared his throat once from the doorway. My daughter looked at him and then back at me and then down at the counter. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's something you'll need to figure out," I said, "the same way I've been figuring things out." They were gone in 3 weeks. They didn't say much during the process. My daughter left a note on the kitchen counter the morning they drove away. It said, "I love you. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough." I folded the note and put it in the drawer where I keep Frank's letters. The months that followed were quieter than I expected and less lonely than I had feared. Andre came to check on me twice a month, and we'd have dinner and he'd make me laugh, which he was always good at. I changed my locks. I set up direct notifications on all my accounts. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Mosley who specialized in late-life grief and family trauma, and who had the rare gift of listening without rushing to fill silence. One afternoon in February, sitting in her office with winter light coming through the blinds, she asked me what I was most proud of in all of it. I thought about it for a while. "I trusted myself," I finally said. "When something felt wrong, I didn't talk myself out of it. I paid attention." She nodded slowly. "That's not a small thing," she said. "A lot of people don't. I know that now in a way I didn't before. I've spoken to other women since then. Friends, neighbors, women I've met through a senior advocacy group I joined in the spring. And so many of them have stories that begin the same way mine did. With someone close to them noticing something, offering help, making themselves indispensable in that careful, practiced way, and then slowly, quietly, rearranging the furniture of a person's life while they're standing right there. It happens because we trust the people we've spent our lives loving. It happens because loneliness after loss can make even a complicated presence feel like company. It happens because we have been taught to believe that needing help means accepting whatever help is offered, without question, without inspection, without the self-preservation we'd apply to a stranger. But your home is yours. Your accounts are yours. Your name on a document means something only when you've chosen to put it there. And being someone's mother, being someone's anything, does not obligate you to become invisible while they decide what to do with your life. I still live in Cincinnati. I did not sell the house. The garden came back strong last summer. I grew tomatoes again for the first time since Frank died, and I sat on the back porch in August eating them with salt the way he always did, and I thought, I am still here. I am still exactly who I always was. That is the thing no one managed to take from me. Not the fog, not the fear, not the sound of my daughter's voice saying she doesn't even remember our conversations anymore. I remembered everything. I still do.